Over the years that I've worked with the internationally mobile family, I've had an ongoing concern for the process of people returning to their passport or their home country after they've had an overseas assignment. As a matter of fact, it's important for parents to recognize that their children may not be going home even when they, as parents, are considering this as a going home experience. The children may have established home overseas. As a matter of fact, our passport tells us where we legally belong. Our heart tells us where our home is. People who have gone abroad over the past several years have learned that it's a wise thing to be prepared for the experience that lies ahead. Understanding something about the transition experience, understanding something about the culture, developing expectations for the experience of entering a new culture and a new country has come to be a part of the thinking and the wisdom of agencies and companies. Unfortunately, however, when people are preparing to go to their home countries or their passport countries, there's the assumption that they know how it works, that it's not much of a problem. Several years ago, I had opportunity to meet one of the men who was involved in the development of the heat shield on the Reentry capsule in the early days of the space program. One of the things that he said that I found very interesting and very applicable to the situation of the internationally mobile person is that getting there is really not the biggest problem. He said in the process of sending somebody into space, simply putting them on the end of a firecracker and sending them off was fairly easy. The great task was bringing them back again, the reentry. And that reentry took a great deal of planning and preparation. And that's exactly what we hope to do as we share this particular video with you. There are 5 stages in the process of leaving, or in the transition experience. The first one is the involvement stage. That's where a person is and is comfortable before they even know that they're leaving. It's kind of a baseline from which we depart. The leaving stage begins approximately 6 months before the actual leaving event. The individual begins to slowly pull away from friends, relationships, job, various responsibilities, and moves toward the time when they will no longer be a part of that community. Then the transition event occurs where they actually climb on a plane or whatever their means of transportation may be and move to the new place. It starts when a person actually leaves, and it ends when the individual unpacks their mind, when they decide that they are in the new place and they are ready to begin to settle into that new location. At that point, they begin the entering stage. And entering takes approximately a year. The need to see a year's calendar, the events, the flow of life, and go through that cycle once so that when it begins to move through the second cycle, the individual feels at home because they've been there, they've seen it, they know how life works. The actual settling in to become re-involved or re-engaged does not take place until that year cycle is finished. And then at that point, the person begins to move into life in that new location. Many people in transition never get to the 5th stage. Before they enter that stage, they're in the process of leaving again and moving to some other part of the world. But it is helpful for us to understand something of the details of each of those stages, so that as we enter them, we do so with an understanding of what's happening to us and the people around us in the process. For people who travel all over the world and are constantly in transition, it's hard to believe that there are neighborhoods like this where people are born, go to grade school and high school in the area, know all the neighbors and the neighbors know them, and in that area for most of their lives. But there really are people like this, people who are really involved. But it's out of those communities that the transient community comes, that somebody finally moves on. Being involved is nice. It's pleasant to have a place where you belong. You're Social context is one where people know you. They not only know things about you, but they've given you a reputation, hopefully a good one, but a reputation that's built out of things that they know you can do or you can't do. They know your history. They know what you accomplished. They know some of your failures. They have come to appreciate you and your limitations as well as abilities. You can confide in people where friendships develop, and people know enough about you that you don't have to tell them your history and fill in the gaps, because they were there when those things happened to you and they knew you before you knew them in some cases. The context of the community when somebody's really involved is one where a person can have friends and confide in people and have the sense that they really are appreciated. Another aspect of that is how the person feels toward that community. They do have a sense of belonging. They don't have to wonder whether or not they're going to be accepted and whether or not tomorrow they'll still be appreciated. They know they belong there. This is my town, my community, my street, my school. It's a place where people develop a sense of responsibility. They behave in ways that fit in and keep them as a respectable member of the community. It's also a place where people have a sense of responsiveness to the norms. They do certain things without being paid for it because it's expected. They don't do other things because those things could be a problem. Probably the psychological experience of being involved is one that really has to be thought of as well. Because there's a sense of being affirmed. People around you know enough about you that when they give you a compliment, you know that it's genuine, or at least you can evaluate how genuine it is. You're affirmed, you have a sense of the present and a sense of being approved in what you're doing. But probably the key word when you belong somewhere is there's a sense of being safe. You know what to expect of the people around you, and they know what they expect of you. And you know that if you get into a difficult situation, that there are people around who care, and that caring provides a sense of security and a sense of safety for the person who's involved in a community.
I guess just to be honest with the people around you as to what you're going through. Part of the difficulty that I faced was that I hid it all from my parents, from friends. I thought I could deal with it on my own, but there's a lot of complex emotions and feelings that come with leaving, and you just have to take care of a lot of emotional baggage. And so I think it would be really helpful if I was able to be honest about that and to share that with the people around me. So I would definitely do that if I had the chance to go back and redo.
Communities sometimes look like they're pretty settled and people who live in them are involved and this is home. But one of the things that happens is that sometimes people, for various reasons, decide to leave. And when they decide to leave, there's a process that begins that moves them away from that settledness and that involvement in the community. When people are in the process of leaving, they start the process about 6 months before they actually leave. They do it before they realize that it's happening. They begin to pull away from other relationships and other people. They relinquish their roles in their jobs, in organizations. They begin to pull away from friendships. They become more critical. They begin to criticize other people for things that they never knew made them unhappy before. A place becomes too hot, too cold, too dirty. It'll be great to be gone from here. And in that process of criticism, there's tension that builds in relationships. And long-term friendships, even family relationships, are stressed, and conflict may be the result of that. They're in the process of leaving. At the same time that an individual is beginning to start the process of leaving themselves, they trigger a response in the people around them. The social context begins to respond to them as people who are leaving. They realize they're going. They start the process of separation. They recognize that the person is going to be saying goodbye, and so they prepare to say goodbye. There's closure, there's celebration of having been there. There are times of farewell, whether it be meals or some kinds of awards that are given, graduation exercises, goodbye parties. All of those things are part of the process of leaving. In the midst of that, there's also the stress of losing someone. And sometimes the people who are left behind feel betrayed. Family members may feel that they're being forsaken. Friends feel that someone is leaving without really caring for them, having said we'll be friends forever, and then they move to some other part of the globe. And the tensions that begin to build in that situation make it important that people recognize the process of leaving and understand the dynamics in their relationship to other people. The problem is that all of that psychologically is characterized by denial. We tend to deny that we feel rejected, and yet as people stop including us, don't put us into the plans for next year or next month, we feel rejected. And with that, there's a sense of resentment. But we deny that too, because it would be foolish for us to feel resentful about something that is a perfectly normal thing, that people don't include us if we're not going to be there. We also tend to deny that we feel sad or feel grief. Our sense is, no, this is a new thing I'm going to do. We're having a new adventure, a new experience in life. And we deny that we feel sad. We deny the grief. We also tend to deny guilt. The closer we get to leaving, the less willing we are to admit that there are some places where perhaps reconciliation ought to take place, where we ought to confess something that we did that hurt another person. And we brush it aside with the sense that when I leave, everybody will forget anyway. Denial is very characteristic of the process of our leaving. And we even deny that we have expectations. We say, I'm resilient, I'm adaptable, I'm going to a new place, there won't be any problems. And we deny that we have expectations that form in our mind a model of what it's going to be like there, either very good things or very bad things or very threatening things or whatever the mental picture is. Everyone has one. We deny it, and as a result of it, we don't stop to evaluate those expectations and determine whether or not they're both realistic and positive enough to be healthy as we move into that new setting.
I thought I did that when I came here. I thought, hey, I was in Germany, I've had my transition, and I was fine there, I made it, no problem. And then I came here to America and I was like, okay, college is great, I'm having a good time. First semester went by, no problem. And I thought, yeah, I can do this, 4 years, absolutely no problem. I'm not even homesick. And then I ended up going home for Christmas, and that wasn't expected. But my sister really wanted that, and we went, and it was wonderful, and it was a great break. And coming back from there to here was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And that was the first time I was really hit with homesickness. And I just remember walking up to my dorm and just saying, why am I here? I don't even like this place. I feel like I don't belong. I don't even feel like I've really made any connections here. And that was really surprising because I thought I had. And that came as a real shock to me because I thought I had achieved transitioning and, that I was not going to have these kind of problems. And that next semester was really hard for me. To admit that, yeah, okay, I'm homesick. Maybe I don't belong here. Do I belong here? And wrestling with those kind of questions were difficult, but it was good. So I guess that was my marker where I was like, okay, I am here. I can make a choice of whether I'm going to stay here. And I did make that choice.
In the process of thriving through transition, we can't avoid the transition process. We just need to know how to go through it, how to adjust to it, and how to make the right choices. But you can't make the right choices unless you know what's happening in each stage. And when we get to the center of the model of transition, the actual process of transition, we recognize that it starts when we physically leave, and it ends when we unpack our mind at the other end. Now, people who have a long period before they're in a place where they can actually settle in have an extended and often frustrating experience in transition. For instance, the college student leaving high school in the month of May or June, who isn't going to start university until the end of August or into September, goes through an extended period of time of being unable not only to unpack their mind, but even unpack their suitcase. At any rate, that period of transition is one that has certain characteristics that one needs to understand in order to appropriately endure. For instance, when you're going through transition, the way other people respond to you, or what we call the social status, is that they regard you as being basically statusless. They don't know anything about you. They don't know what you can do, what you can't do, what you will do, what you won't do, what you like to do, what you don't like to do. They don't know what your past has been. They don't know what your accomplishments or your failures have been. And so basically, you're statusless until they have opportunity to begin to get to know you. And sometimes there isn't enough time in the transition process for people to even begin to get to know who we are and about our background and our present experience. Not only are we statusless, but we're also structureless. We may not have a job or a particular role to play, and so people are not quite sure what to do with us. We're just there. And finally, one of the elements in that process of the heart of transition is the element of people viewing us as being clueless. There are all kinds of things we don't know about the place where we are when we're in transition. And people may view us as being a bit naive or uninformed, when in reality it's simply we've come from somewhere else and know other material from another place that may not be fitting where we are in the midst of transition. They also see you as being clueless, that you really don't know all kinds of things, and it's probably true. The unfortunate thing is that often people think we don't know the things we do know. You get to a new place and people somehow almost have an instinct that they focus in on what you already know and explain it to you in detail. And after a while you feel so aggravated by that that you want to say to them, I wasn't born when I got off the plane. I had a life before, and I know that stuff before, and I did it before, and I do it better than you do. And that, you have that urge to maybe kind of emote. But the other side of that, however, that's really strange is that those same people don't tell you the things you don't know. And they'll give you instructions, and they'll say, you go into that little town, and you drive halfway through town, and you take a right-hand turn. How do you know what's halfway? You have to drive all the way through town and come back halfway. Now you know it's halfway, but now it's a left-hand turn instead of a right-hand turn. And the thing that the kiss of death is when they say to you, and you can't miss it. Yeah, you can, and you'll prove that you can. And as a matter of fact, that's one of the dilemmas when you go back to your home country. You start to tell, somebody says, and how were things in the Netherlands? You say, oh, that's good. And you kind of back your truck up with all that information, it's a dump truck, and you start to dump that, and about 15 seconds into the process, they get glassy-eyed. And you get the feeling they don't care. You know what the real reason is? They don't care. And they don't know what to do with all that information you gave because it really doesn't relate to them. They don't have any hooks to hang it on.
Here at the top of Niagara Falls, we're made aware of what transition is all about. The heart of transition is characterized by chaos. The noise, the confusion, all kinds of things that happen to us in the process of moving from one place to another creates a great deal of tension.
Our social posture in this transition experience is one of chaos. Life gets crazy. We have exaggerated problems. We feel ill and we're sure it's a serious, serious illness. We lose things. We lose small things like small passports and small wallets. And part of the reason that we lose things is not only are we losing the thing, we've lost the place to put the thing. The pocket that we usually use, or the back of the drawer, or the cabinet where certain items are placed, no longer are available to us. And we set things down or put them in places that are very difficult to remember where. So we lose them. We get confused by the circumstances around us. We may not know where we are at a given moment and are not sure when we wake up in the morning what place we're in. We also find that behavior can be exaggerated. The individual who tends to be very quiet and laid back may become very quiet and ceases to interrelate with other people even at the level that is their normal level of interaction. The individual, however, on the other side, who is more outgoing, sometimes comes off like a happy St. Bernard puppy, where they almost attack people and explain who they are and how glad they are to meet them and what they would like to know about them. Because this is the way they accommodate for that sense of chaos and trying to bring back order into their own life experience. We tend to be very self-centered. The family that moves together faces this often as a major problem, because children are naturally self-centered. That's the process of maturing, is moving away from your self-centeredness to otherliness. Mom and dad aren't usually expected to be self-centered, but in the middle of transition, one's own health, one's own needs, one's own possessions, one's comfort suddenly become extremely important to the place where a spouse may feel that the other spouse isn't concerned about them, or a child feels that they're being pushed aside. And many times when that happens with the children will act out in ways that guarantee that mom and dad will pay attention to them. And as a matter of fact, sometimes spouses do the same thing. But the self-centeredness will pass, and we need to understand that about each other and be patient with each other, whether we're in the same family or whether we're colleagues or fellow students or teachers in a classroom. Misunderstanding is one of the issues that we face when we're in a brand new place. We misunderstand things because of the ambiguity of newness, or of the difference between what we've been accustomed to in the past and what we're being exposed to in the present. We misunderstand nonverbal communication. People stand a bit farther away from us than we're used to, and we think they're avoiding us. They stand too close, and it may send messages that are also inappropriate and misunderstood. The psychological experience is that of anxiety. We feel anxious about our new situation and wonder if we're going to be safe. There are fears that arise about how easily we're going to find our way around, whether or not we'll get lost. Children often experience in the midst of this intense concern about their own safety and their well-being, and the safety and well-being of their parents. Many times children will hear news or overhear conversations from adults that tell them things that are really not the truth, but they expand them to be issues that cause fear. In the midst of that fear and tension, individuals often will have very strange and extreme dreams. The loss of body parts, the sense of loss of relatives, perhaps by death, being lost in the woods or lost in the city, maybe very intense, disturbing dreams that may repeat themselves. And people wonder if they're losing their grip on life and if there's some terrible omen of some dreadful thing to come. In fact, the dreams are simply the way our subconscious is trying to handle the confusion of transition and the losses that we've had. It's also at this point that those losses become very real to us, and we experience some of the grief that comes from having lost people and places and possessions and pets, and perhaps having not allowed ourselves to acknowledge that these are going to be grief experiences. And certainly the failure to leave right makes its impact here. Also, expectations that are unmet will produce some disappointment, and the disappointment makes its impact in transition as well.
I wish people would understand that it's not just coming in and transitioning. So it took me a year, which is a lot longer than I thought it would take me.
The heart of transition begins when we actually start the travel. Climb on a plane or boat or whatever we're going to travel, and we begin to move. That's when transition begins. It ends when we unpack our mind. It's key for people to understand that the chaos of leaving will not end until they have not only unpacked the suitcase, hung their clothes, adjusted their furniture, but have gotten on with the business of making a mental adjustment to the new place. Years ago, Dr. Max Raines of the Education Department of Michigan State University put together the model that he called the ADAPT model, Transactions for Transition. The A in ADAPT stands for Activate Commitment. If an individual is going to settle into a place, the key issue in unpacking one's mind is to decide, I live here now. This is the place where I'm going to work. This is the place where I'm going to learn my way around. I'm going to learn the language. I'm going to develop friends because I have activated commitment in this place. The second aspect of adapt is to develop support systems. That has to be done consciously. We develop support systems by inviting people to help us settle in, to be our mentors, to give us information about the place, and to correct us when we're wrong. That whole process of developing support is something that we have to take responsibility for. It's good when other people help us, but we have to allow people to step into that place of supporting us. The second A in adapt is to adjust our expectations. Before we leave, we have to think about the future. We have to put ourselves as much as possible in that place to develop realistic and positive expectations. But whenever you enter a new place, the expectations that we have had before need to be tweaked. Sometimes it's a large jump in readjusting our expectations, but nevertheless, we have to rethink what we were expecting so that we adjust the process and thus avoid the problem of disappointment because expectations aren't met. The fourth stage is to prioritize our goals. Whenever we reach into a new place and settle into a new job, there's always somebody that has some different ideas about what we ought to do. It's very possible for us to be attracted by those other and new goals, and in the very process, fail to do the thing that we've gone there to do. To sit down and think carefully, what are my purposes, why am I here, what do I expect to do while I'm here, and then prioritize those goals so I accomplish the ultimate for which I've come. And then the final stage is to transpose our identity. We may have been a leader before, we may have been in a place where we had all kinds of accomplishments that were recognized, but when you get to a new place, you're a learner. And the expectations of the people around you make it imperative that we adjust our own sense of identity, who we are, why we're there, and what we're doing. The ADAPT model: activate commitment, develop support, adjust expectations, prioritize our goals, and transpose our identity. That's the strategy for unpacking your mind.
They had a job to do, and other things about school and so forth, and the frequency of movement and instability that brought, that was secondary. You know, so we adapted. And then after all, isn't it adaptation, the thing that you'll get from that is a benefit? So, I mean, you adapt.
Yeah.
The work that I did in consulting for the U.S. government, for example, I was called upon to do some work in Rwanda, in Haiti. Now I'm working in the Middle East on a committee there, the Anti-Incitement Committee, designed to find ways of reducing the incitement to violence that occurs between Palestinians and Israelis. And and then 1 year I spent in Bosnia with the United Nations International Police Task Force. I mean, all of that has moved me into these various opportunities that I'm convinced would not have been there had not I had this global experience that gave me that third culture that you are talking about. It's an opening of the peripheral vision to more than just what we see. You see more and have a better opportunity as a result to give more to the world.
Sometimes I get tired of being just, the friend who's different and tell me all about your life, and it's so different than mine, it's really interesting. But other times it's really nice to just be able to vent and to explain where I'm coming from and to feel like other people are interested. So not everybody's like that, and you can't expect everybody to be really interested in everything about you, but there are going to be some people who want to get to know you and want to talk, and that is really encouraging.
Once we've unpacked our mind, we're then ready to move into the entering stage. The process of entering, however, isn't one that is kind of a neat, clear line between transition and entering. It's kind of a jagged line. The two experiences sometimes get mixed together. That entering stage takes at least a year. It takes a year to go through the cycle of the community in which we're living and to become familiar with weather patterns and behavior patterns and celebrations and traditions. And the second time around, through the second year, we begin to feel that we're somewhat familiar with what's going on. I'd like to share with you a little bit of the elements that are involved in that entering process. First of all, when we look at the social status, how other people behave toward us in the middle of entry, there are several things that are helpful for us to know. First of all, they consider us marginal. We don't really belong to the community. We're really not a part of everything that's going on. We certainly aren't part of the history. And as marginal people, there are certain responses that people have toward us. They may tend to be a bit superficial in their handling of our social relationship with them. They don't include us as part of the in-group yet. There is a tentative acceptance. They want to see how we really are going to behave over the long haul, and perhaps even how long we're going to stay. Matter of fact, we tend to evaluate how we develop relationships on the basis of how long somebody's going to be there. We ask 3 questions when a new person arrives. We ask them, basically, who are you? That means what's your name and what do you do? That's combined. The second thing we ask them is, where are you from? And we want to know all the places they're from, not just where they were from the last time, but we want to get so we can say, oh, you were in Singapore once? I knew, did you know? And pretty soon you find out that you're related. Isn't it interesting how, everybody knows everybody else, and you have all these connections, and you think, oh my goodness, what a very small world. You hear that again and again, and it is. But the third question we ask is, when are you leaving, or how long are you going to stay? And we ask that question to evaluate how much energy I'm going to put into that relationship. If the person says they're going to stay 3 weeks, we say, oh, that's interesting. And we don't talk to them anymore. If they say they're going to stay 3 months, we say, maybe we could have lunch someday. If they say, I'm going to stay here for 3 years, we say, oh, good, we can be close friends, because I'm leaving in 2 years, and you're going to have to say goodbye to me. And so we can commit ourselves to somebody who's going to stay a little bit longer than we are, because that's a lifelong friendship. And our lives are just broken into little small segments. But we evaluate those relationships, and we also learn, sometimes in an unfortunate way, how to let go of people too quickly. We have that tentative acceptance of the people around us to determine how much they want to invest in the relationship. People are uncertain of where to place us or how to use us. They don't know anything about us. They don't know what our abilities or our inabilities are. So they're not sure what kind of decisions they ought to make about placing us. They may misinterpret our behavior. Nonverbal communication that comes from one part of the world and one language group may continue to be used, even though the language may be similar or the same language actually spoken. Some of the nonverbal aspects of how close we stand, how much we touch, how much we look the other person in the eye, all of those things may be misinterpreted by another person in terms of their own response back to us. There is one danger also, and that danger in the transition process, when we get into entering, is the danger of the wrong people becoming our mentors. Now, a mentor is a very important person to have in one's life when you move into a new situation. In a new culture, a mentor does 2 things for us. First of all, the mentor introduces us to the culture and introduces the culture to us. When it introduces the culture to us, what it's doing is telling us about that culture, how to fit into that culture, what to do, what not to do. They may even tell us that gestures we've used are obscene in that culture, that may have been perfectly permissible in our own. They keep us from being embarrassed or perhaps worse than that, making some very serious mistakes. Mentors are very important people. The second thing that a mentor does is to represent us to the community. Other people may accept us because we are friends with that mentor. That person may speak on our behalf and tell people in the community that we are acceptable people and people that are okay to get to know and work with. Now that's what a mentor does. That's what a good mentor does. The problem is that in the process of entering, the new person is marginal. People who are in trouble in their own community are also marginal. And they are often looking for someone new who doesn't know them, doesn't know their background. They may even be looking for someone to become their ally. And the new person becomes a target sometimes, and really all too often, for the individuals who are the unhealthy mentors in a community, the unhealthy welcome wagon people. Care has to be given for young people moving into a new school, that the mentors that make contact with them initially are the healthiest people in the school, not the ones who are already in trouble. But it's not just kids that have that problem. Adults may run into the same thing on their job. They may run into the same problem in their community with mentors that are searching for the newcomer. Just a warning about the issues of entering a new culture.
There were a number of people who were great mentors for me. One was a gentleman in China who worked for me. He was about my same age. And he had gone through the Cultural Revolution, and he had been one of the Red Guard in the Cultural Revolution. In fact, he had not been able to get an education during that period because he was out working for Mao. And this person really taught me probably the most about what China was all about. And I got to meet him and his son and his wife and his family, and we went through a lot together, including his son's appendectomy. And I learned a whole lot about the Chinese medical system by going through that experience. But he helped in many different ways in introducing me to Chinese culture, telling me what I was doing wrong, what I was doing right, correcting me, helping me to know how to meet officials, because he had been doing this type of work for a number of years. And he was Chinese, and he was trying to help me to be Chinese.
Here at this giant whirlpool, we have a good illustration of what happens after the chaos of transition. It gets quieter, but doesn't get totally quiet. There's a lot to do in the process of entry. And there are some strategies that are critical to making entry happen. One of the things that's critical in the process of entry is doing research. Recognizing that part of the transposition of one's identity is to that of a learner. When you're in a new place, you've got to learn a great deal about people and places and process. You have to learn where to buy the groceries, how to talk to the colleagues from the culture in which you find yourself, a multitude of other things that are all part of settling into a new place. That's one of the key parts of the strategy of when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Research is the R. O is to observe. Keep your eyes open for what is around you, to make very conscious efforts in observing what's going on in the lives of people. Beyond research and observation is the matter of finding a mentor. Getting a support system is terribly important. Several aspects to the strategy of settling in are not only the issue of research and observation and finding mentors, but a series of E-words that help us to understand what we need to do in order to adjust to the new place and have a sense of belonging. One of the things is to develop the expectation for surprises. There are always going to be surprises, and if you can view those surprises as adventures, you're in a much better position to respond appropriately to the things that happen that you cannot otherwise anticipate. But beside the expectation for surprises, there needs to be the commitment to experience life, not to hide out, not to find a place where you can escape the new place and the new people, but rather stepping into that new world and allowing yourself to develop friendships, to get to know the area, to get to know what the expectations are. The third E in our doing as the Romans do is the matter of explaining. Once you're in a culture, it's important to watch for the reasons why people do things in that culture. And whether it's a brand new culture in another country or whether it's a new job, there are reasons for people doing things. And being able to explain those reasons helps us to settle in and understand the values that underlie the decisions that people make. And then finally, the fourth E is to enjoy. If you can come to the place where you enjoy growing, enjoy living in a new place so that you're a learner and you become more mature and more capable of dealing with life, there's an ongoing excitement that allows you to function well as you enter a new culture. Entering into that new culture, you finally get to the place where you start to settle in, where there's a sense of arriving that allows you then to become the productive person you intended to be from the very onset.
Coming to the point where I was comfortable with my surroundings and where I was at, and was an active walk towards acceptance. Initially, my first approach to a different culture and different circumstances was, well, I can mold it to how I'm used to. And you quickly realize the futility of that. You don't form good relationships. People think you're stuck up. People think that that generally you're just not a very likable fellow, or if you are, just aloof. It's coming to the realization that the world is different and the world doesn't revolve around you, and you have to really understand the culture and embrace the culture to a certain point to really begin that process of thawing out and letting people get close to you, you getting closer to these people, and relating in a way that's common.
Rome wasn't built in a day, and culture stress doesn't happen and be resolved in a day. And culture stress is part of the experience of fitting into a new community. Part of the process of adjusting to a new place is understanding what we're going to go through. Not only so it does not surprise us when we go through it, but so that we can make better choices that move us through that experience as quickly and smoothly as possible. The process involves 4 major stages: fun, flight, fight, and finally fit. Now the fun stage, or what we also call the honeymoon stage, is the place where an individual moves into a new culture and sees things that either are similar and make them feel comfortable because it's kind of like home, or it's satisfying because it's different than home and what I really wanted to experience. Sometimes it's both. It's both fun because it is similar, but it's also fun because it's also satisfying. Somewhere about 48 hours into the experience of being in a brand new culture, individuals begin to catch the sense that things are a little bit different. Now, in some cases, the similarities carry a person through for a longer period of time. In some settings, the honeymoon stage lasts a very short period of time, and the person is jolted by how different the new culture and the new situation really is. At any rate, they then move into the flight stage. Flight stage occurs when I see things different and alarming. This is really what culture shock is all about. It's the jolt of seeing things that are so different that they frighten me, that they cause me to back up and away, even to hide. People hide in different ways. Some people sleep a lot. They go to bed early, get up late, and take naps in between. And in sleeping a lot, they anesthetize themselves to the things that are alarming. If they can just stay out of the way, it's not quite so troublesome. Now, in the first few days of a major transfer to another part of the world, individuals may blame that on jet lag. But when an individual is 4 or 5 weeks into their experience and they're still blaming it on jet lag, probably something else is going on. Now, sometimes people hide out, and the flight stage is characterized by becoming avid readers. An individual who's never read a novel before suddenly discovers that whoever the nearest novelist might be and whatever books are nearby become the very object of their attention. Losing oneself in fantasy is a great way to protect oneself against the differences in the community. Some people become great writers. They write lots of letters or send lots of emails. They may keep very detailed journals and find that this is, again, a way that they can escape dealing with other people and encountering the culture. Many people over the last several years have discovered that hiding in cyberspace is one of the best ways that they can escape. And there are some people who spend their entire overseas experience doing one or the other of the above, finding ways to avoid contact in the other community. Now, sometimes it takes on a very legitimate form, or what seems to be, as they spend huge amount of time with people from their own culture or other expats and simply avoid the contact with the nationals in the culture where they're living. Once a person has moved through this, and hopefully choice is made to move through this, from the fun stage to the flight stage, it's often the fight stage that they begin to experience. And the fight stage occurs when an individual says, why don't these people do things right? And there's anger that's connected with doing things right. And right simply means, why don't they do it the way that makes me comfortable?
When I came here, I thought everything is wrong here. My way was the only right way, and everything people do here is not how it's supposed to be. It's different. And then I realized that it's not really wrong way, it's just a different way of doing things. Now I understand that it's okay. It's okay that it's different, and I think I can deal with that.
One of the things that's helpful for an individual to recognize is this, that a culture has absolutely no responsibility to make outsiders comfortable. When they do, that's nice and we need to be grateful. But it has no responsibility. It has responsibility to people in the culture, not the people who have invaded the culture. On the other hand, as those who are the invaders, as those who have moved into another culture, we have the responsibility to work at making the culture comfortable with our being there. And once we settle this particular expectation in our own minds, we're in a much better place to move on.
I guess I expected to come and make some really good friends, but I don't know, not quite belong completely. But I've found that that's been changing, and it's becoming better and better. And I think Germany really helped in my transition here to America. I had some good friends who would tell me, hey, Amy, when you say that, I feel like you're discriminating against me, that you're putting down my Americanness. And that was really good for me to hear, because I didn't know that. Because with my friends, it was, a big thing. You make fun of America, you put down America. And here I was facing 4 years in America, definitely, and who knows how much after that. And to have people before I got there tell me that, Amy, these are some things that I'm not comfortable with, and I don't like seeing myself in that light, and you put me in a bad light. That helped me. And I asked them to keep doing that because, I'd rather do it there than when I get here and everyone's American. So that helped, that definitely.
However, unfortunately, sometimes our moving on from the anger stage to the next stage isn't much better, because the next stage tends to be the mockery stage. And mockery is probably one of the most dangerous places for a person to be, and one of the easiest places for expats to get stuck. Because mockery doesn't carry with it the unreasonable, immature aspect of anger. If a person has a good sense of humor, they have a quick tongue, they are able to express themselves clearly to other people, they may say things that make everyone else laugh, and other people gather around them and affirm that you're right in the comments that you've made. There's a shorthand that often is characteristic of people who are mockers. Quick ways of saying, nobody does anything right in this culture. I'm having a blank day. Or, after all, this is, and we finish the sentence with whatever this country is. We may use letters that have become the shorthand that signal to everybody else our mockery. TIA can mean this is America, this is Australia, this is Argentina, this is Africa. But when you're living in that country and you do that, you're suggesting that in this country, nothing seems to work right. Nothing goes the way I expect it to. And that mockery is one that often encourages others to mock. As a matter of fact, there's several things that happen when we become mockers. One of those things is that when we've mocked someone else, it's very, very difficult to take them seriously. Secondly, we hurt our relationship to the people who are being mocked because people know they're being mocked, and many times they're kind enough not to let us know that we are mocking them or that they know they're being mocked. But rather than reacting, they simply feel hurt and many times withdraw. But I think one of the greatest dangers in mockery is what happens to our young people. That when adults become mockers, they give young people the permission and the ammunition to also be mockers. And when we do that, we rob third culture kids of one of the greatest advantages of growing up among cultures, and that is to learn how to respect another culture. Our modeling as adults of how to respect people in another culture is key to whether or not our children learn the same lessons. The fourth stage of culture stress is on the upswing, and it's learning how to fit in the new place. And that starts with acceptance. It starts with the ability to look at a culture and recognize this is the way this culture is at this moment. Now that doesn't mean approval. It doesn't mean that everything is right in another culture simply because it's culturally accepted. It does mean, however, that as a newcomer, I have to recognize that at this moment, in this situation, this is the way this culture works. And when I begin to accept that, I also accept the fact that there are many things that are neither good nor bad, they're just simply different. They're not done the way I do them at home. They're not done the way my larger cultural community does them. They are simply different and okay. Now, it is important to recognize that in every culture, there are, in fact, maladaptive behaviors that are destructive. And so we're not saying that it's okay to be relativistic in a culture, but we are saying that it's important to recognize a culture for what it is and where it stands at a given moment. Once I gain this acceptance, it opens the door for me to search for understanding, to look at a culture and realize that a culture did not just happen by accident. There were very good reasons for cultural behaviors beginning, even though those good reasons may have disappeared. What may have given rise to one kind of cultural behavior at one point in history may change, but the behavior continues. Once I begin to look for understanding, however, I then am in a place to move one step further, and that is to creative interaction with people in the culture, to learn how to respect the culture, to learn how to approach people in that culture in ways that will make it possible for them to respond positively to me, as well as my responding positively to them. Being creative is an important aspect of finally resolving the issue of culture stress. And helping our children to do it is done largely by modeling, not by teaching.
Not knowing that this is where I wanted to settle, I wanted to keep one foot out the door, just in case I wanted to leave. And that definitely kept me from making close friendships. One of my mentors here at college, she encouraged me to get involved in the community, to get involved in the local church, and that was when things started turning around for me, and I felt like I could make it here.
Readjustment, re-engaging, fitting in, feeling at home. That's the goal of transition. I found that there are 6 reasons, at least, why people fail to adjust and fit in and re-engage. One of them is they choose not to. Another is that they don't like the new culture. A third is that they don't know the new culture and don't know how to get to know it. A fourth is simply personality. A fifth reason is their fear of disloyalty. The 6th reason, which is probably the most prevalent, is the failure to leave right. These are the 6 reasons that I see as the major reasons that people don't re-engage. There are times when people make a move and they do it unwillingly. It may be the child, it may be the accompanying spouse, and they move without having been asked if they wanted to move, perhaps even having expressed their disdain for that. They didn't want to move and were forced to anyway. And in the process, they decide either consciously or unconsciously that they'll sabotage the experience of moving into a new place by choosing not to settle. Probably the most graphic illustration of that I heard several years ago was told to me by a young man who had grown up in a military family where his father was committed to stay long term and the mom wanted out. When the father refused to listen, the result was that mom decided that the next move she would pack very carefully in boxes that were very well structured and well taped with duct tape, and would label them, catalog the contents, and when they moved to the next place, refused to unpack them. Actually lived out of those boxes. They made 5 moves in 10 years, and during that time, she never unpacked a box, hung a curtain on a window, put a bedspread on a bed, tablecloth on a table, or a picture on the wall. This young man reported that he felt that he had lived in a warehouse, but he said it wasn't just a physical warehouse. It was an emotional warehouse where the deadness and dullness in the relationship between his mom and dad had a profound effect on him as well as on their relationship. Sometimes people try to send the message that they don't want to be somewhere simply by choosing not to settle in that new place. A second reason is that sometimes they don't like the new place. They didn't intend not to like it, they just got there and decided they didn't like it, and have decided that the only way to adjust is when you do like something. The reality is that there are a lot of places where an individual may not appreciate being, maybe even the place where they were born and grew up, but they still choose to adjust, and they are able to adjust. The third reason is that they don't know the new culture, or they don't know how to get to know the new culture. They've never been given the tools, and they have decided that it's never going to be possible to fit in because they'll never understand the people, they'll never understand the ways life functions in this new place, and as a result of that, they're unable to fit in and feel comfortable. A fourth reason that people may not engage is that they are afraid of being disloyal to the place they lived before. I find this particularly true with third culture kids, and it may happen even as they try to resettle in the country that supposedly is their home country, or at least their passport country. The fear is that if I allow myself to appreciate or enjoy what's here, it's demonstrating that I don't fully appreciate or didn't fully enjoy where I was before. The fear is being disloyal. I think it's possible to enjoy a chapati and a Big Mac all at the same time. A fifth reason for people not settling into a new place and re-engaging is simply personality. Some individuals settle more readily than other people. They enjoy moving from one place to another, they unpack their mind more quickly, and their personality allows them to settle. But probably the most serious and most often seen reason for people not re-engaging in a new place is the fact that, number 6, they haven't left well. People who fail to leave another place with all of the business taken care of that needs to be taken care of often carry those problems into the new situation. People who don't leave right don't enter right. Probably the 6 top reasons why people fail to re-engage successfully.
The good news about transition is that we move from the chaos into the quieting of entering and hopefully resettling. We'd like to help you facilitate that by paying attention to what needs to happen ahead of time. Just as the river behind me goes through the tumult of the waterfall with all the chaos of tumbling water, it finally moves downstream to where it gets quieter and it begins to settle into a more peaceful state. We'd like you to come to a place of peaceful state, but to facilitate that, it's important that you pay attention to reconciliation, to affirmation, to the farewells, to the think destination or to the expectations.
not just in situations where you're going to leave for long periods of time or perhaps permanently, but also where you're going to leave for short periods of time, where it's a holiday. One never knows when one may not be able to return to that post overseas. And to help ourselves and our children and our employees to settle into the next place well, it's important that we help them leave the last place well.